build you a temple. The Juhu story. Adventure after adventure after adventure. The conference's other participants offered all sorts of ideas or speculations about how the Gita should be preached. One suggestion was to present it for factory workers and for farmers. Another suggestion was to present it, another based on Vinoba Bhave's ashram was to send as many as 200 women to go barefoot from town to town and preach. Prabhupada replied that everyone was eligible, Vaishyas, Shudras, and women as well, but that it was more difficult for women, so men should preach too. The entire program was enlivened by Prabhupada's presence. He was, after all, recognized as the world's foremost preacher of the Bhagavad Gita. He knew the science of the Gita and had gone all over the world and distributed millions of copies of Bhagavad Gita as it is. He had preached the message of Gita and made thousands of devotees who had become followers and preachers of the Gita themselves. From every point of view, age, learning, success, and preaching, he was the natural leader. Although many other dignitaries also participated, including a representative of Swami Chinmayananda, V.S. Page, the chairman of the Legislative Council of Maharashtra, and Swami Chidananda, our friend, Saraswati. Everyone gave Prabhupada first importance. He had been the first to speak and had been allotted 45 minutes, where the others were given only 10 minutes each. Sriman Narayan and Ramakrishna Bajaj, all the organizers, were most respectful of him, and the public was wildly enthusiastic over him and the devotees. On the last day of the conference, there was to be a meeting of the coordinating committee to discuss practical programs for promoting the teachings of the Gita, but Prabhupada said he wasn't feeling well and that they should begin without him. The organizers begged him, "No, Swamiji, you must come. The meeting won't be complete without you." The committee members wanted to agree on a list of specific initiatives, and so, to accommodate Prabhupada, they would first prepare a list of proposals and then invite him to come. When Prabhupada came and spoke, he stuck to one point, parampara. Unless they followed the disciplic succession presented the Bhagavad Gita faithfully, without personal interpretation, they had no right to preach in its name. Quote, "You can preach any philosophy you like," he told them, "but don't take the name of Bhagavad Gita." He explained that because he was presenting the Bhagavad Gita as it actually was, his efforts were bringing success. Quote, "There is no interpretation. Krishna says, I am the Supreme. Matak Parataram Nanyat." We are presenting, here's God. You are searching after God, Krishna, and they, foreign devotees, are accepting. How they are accepting? Because it is the real thing. There is no interpretation. Then he invited the committee to present its proposals, but after the very first one, he returned to his main point. They had to surrender to parampara, as Arjuna had surrendered to Krishna as guru. Only then could they preach Bhagavad Gita. And he would not proceed to the next proposal until the group accepted this basic principle for understanding and properly presenting the actual teachings of Bhagavad Gita. Imam vivasvate yogam proktavam aham avyayam, Prabhupada quoted. I spoke the science of Bhagavad Gita to the sun god millions of years ago. My calculation, it is 40 million years ago. Now, Who will believe that Krishna spoke this Bhagavad Gita 40 million years ago to the sun god? Who will believe that? They'll say mythology. So where is the faith in Bhagavad Gita and faith in the words of Krishna? Understanding Hamlet without Hamlet. You cannot make your interpretation that whatever is written there, I take instead. That is not the way of understanding Bhagavad Gita. Then, from the very beginning, you'll spoil it. Then, what is the meaning of preaching Bhagavad Gita? If you do not accept the direction of the author, then what right you have got to say that you have understood Bhagavad Gita? Could it be that there may be different interpretations? One participant asked. No, Prabhupada replied, that is not possible. That is not the process. You cannot interpret Bhagavad Gita. If you want to preach Bhagavad Gita, you must preach what Krishna has said. If you have got a different philosophy, you can say, but don't cheat people that you are speaking Bhagavad Gita and then interpret in your own way. Cheat others and be cheated yourself. You cannot do that. Well, for example, Tilak Maharaj, the man broke in. Tilak, Gandhi, whoever, Prabhupada said. But the point is that you have to understand Bhagavad Gita according to the direction of the author. Because you are Mr. Tilak or Mr. Gandhi, you can do anything in the name of Bhagavad Gita? No, that's not the idea, the man objected. But there are different types of slokas. How you have got different types? The Bhagavad Gita begins, Dharmakshete, Kurukshetre, Samaveta Yuyutsava. So, Dharmakshetre, Kurukshetre, how can you interpret in a different way? Kurukshetra is already there. How can you interpret Kurukshetra means this, Kurukshetra means that? You cannot interpret. Yes, but who decided what exactly the meaning is? What exactly is the meaning? Exactly the meaning is there. Literally, yes. The thing is, interpretation is required when you cannot understand. If I say, this is a stick, everyone knows it is a stick. So if you say, no, I don't accept it as stick, what is that interpretation? Everyone knows it is stick. Similarly, Kurukshetra means that big place still existing. And in the Vedic Shastra, it is ordered, Kurukshetram Devanam Deva Yajanam. You go. From time immemorial, it has been a place of pilgrimage. Even Krishna, during a solar eclipse, he went there with his family. Jagannath. The ceremony is there, Rath Yatra, because Krishna, Balaram, and Subhadra came in the same chariot. That is being performed. So Kurukshetra, Dharmakshetra, at least 5,000 years ago, the system was people used to come to Kurukshetra as a place of pilgrimage, Dharmakshetra. And Kurukshetra, the place is there. And the two families, the Kurus and the Pandavas, they fought. The battle of Kurukshetra took place. These things are evident. Then why is there need of interpreting? That is the first point. These points are very clear. Every point is very clear. In the Bhagavad Gita, every point is very clear unless you interpret in the wrong way. Swami Ji, another participant said, I have a question. We were having a discussion just before you came whether there's any possibility of coordination of the preaching of Bhagavad Gita. How can there be coordination? Prabhupada replied, he is interpreting in his own way. He is interpreting in his own way. He is interpreting in his own way. So where's the question of coordination? First thing is, take Bhagavad Gita as it is. Then there will be coordination. Why should you interpret? You have no right to interpret the words of Bhagavad Gita. But Swamiji, another participant, said, you have also written so much literature on this. That is interpretation. No, that is not interpretation. That is explanation. Interpretation, if I change Kurukshetra into something else, that is interpretation. That is being done. Instead of collecting so many hundreds of thousands of literatures on the Bhagavad Gita, why not take Bhagavad Gita as it is? What is the difficulty? Kurukshetra is historical fact. Mahabharata means Greater India. It is itihasa, or history. If you don't believe that there was any battle in Kurukshetra, then you decry even the history. Then how you can approach Bhagavad Gita? Every point of Bhagavad Gita is clear. It is clear. There's no need of interpretation. That is the first thing. If you interpret, you spoil the whole thing because interpretation is required when the things are not clear. If everything is clear, why should you interpret? Take the Sanskrit, Dharma Kshetra, Kurukshetra. You don't require to go to any other language. Take the Sanskrit, Kurukshetra. It is clear. Dharma Kshetra is clear. Pandava is clear. Then why should we interpret? This practice should be stopped. If you want to preach Bhagavad Gita and you actually want to preach your own philosophy through Bhagavad Gita, don't do this cheating. You preach your philosophy. You're at liberty. You can preach any philosophy you like. But don't take Bhagavad Gita and do this nonsense. That is being done. Therefore, instead of studying, collecting so many literatures, why not take Bhagavad Gita as it is and preach? As evidence to prove this, people all over the world are taking. Before me, 200 years, there was preaching of Bhagavad Gita, and not a single person became a devotee. It is the history of devotees of Krishna. Now you see thousands. Why? Because there's no interpretation. Krishna says, I am the Supreme, Matak Paratram Nanyat, and we are presenting, here's God. You are searching after God, Krishna, and they are accepting. They do not ask, what is Krishna? How are they accepting? Because he is the real thing. There's no interpretation. They're not Hindus. They're not born in India. How have they come to Krishna consciousness? They have given up bad habits, no illicit sex, because you cannot understand Krishna unless you're free from all sinful activities. No one who is sinful, he cannot understand Krishna. And one who is sinful, he cannot understand Krishna. Namam duskritana mudha prapajante naradama. We test him. We test like this, that Krishna says that anyone who does not surrender to Krishna as the Supreme Lord, he is under the four groups, Duskritina, Modha, Naradama, Maya, Pratyagana. That's it. We are fools and rascals. We have no education, but we take Krishna's word that here is a fool, here is a sinful man, here is a Naradama, here is a Maya Parita. So unless you stick to this point, that we shall preach Bhagavad Gita as Krishna says, then there's no meaning of it. You are misled and you will mislead others. But if you take Bhagavad Gita as it is, as Krishna said, then it will be all right. But if you're not prepared to do that, then however, you make combination, coordination, interpretation, thousands of literatures, the result will be zero. This is practical. Now, what is the first point? Jagadish read, to collect all available materials and survey all institutions in India and abroad who are doing work based on Bhagavad Gita so that we'll have completely up-to-date library. What is the need of collecting? Prabhupada asked. For information, a participant replied, information. Bhagavad Gita takes information from Bhagavad Gita. What others have said, you have nothing to do. Now, for example, a participant said, we should have all the published literature available on Gita. Then there will be no limit. Prabhupada said, there are so many, 600,000 interpretations. Then your life will be spent collecting. If I want to go to Bombay, I must have the correct timetable, not a false timetable. Some of the committee members objected that there are many approaches to the Gita, and one of the proposals was to survey all the different institutions, both in India and abroad, to compile a library of all the work that had been done to Prabhupada return to his point. Krishna directs, evam parampara praptam, imara jarshayo vidu. He quoted, parampara means to hear the truth from the spiritual master. You take this. Arjuna, when he was puzzled whether to fight or not, accepted Krishna as guru. Shishyas te ham. Now, I don't want to talk or argue with you, because as soon as you become a shishya, disciple, you have to accept the statement of the guru. That is the relationship between guru and shishya. You cannot talk with guru from the same level. Whatever Guru says, you have to accept. Otherwise, don't accept Guru. Don't make a fashion of taking Guru just like you keep a dog. First of all, you have to select Guru. Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. You have to select such a person where you can fully surrender to Krishna, fully surrender. Krishna was accepted by Arjuna like that. Shishas teham sharimam tvam prapanam. First of all, I've surrendered to you. This is the first instruction. That means whatever he says, as at last Arjuna said, Sarvam etadritam manye yan mam vadasi. I totally accept as truth all that you have told me. No, not that you can make cut. This is the process. Here is the parampara. Krishna is speaking to Arjun, and Arjun is accepting. Sarvam etadritam manye yan mam vadasi. Not that you make cut. Whatever you have said. Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram, Paramam Bhavan. You have said that you are the supreme Parabrahma, and I accept it. This is Parampara. We have not seen Krishna talking, but the words are there. Arjuna accepted Krishna as the Parabrahma. How we have changed. Krishna is... First of all, we have to accept the Parampara system. Sakale Neha Yogo Nashta Parantapa. That parampara is now gone. Krishna says, therefore I'm speaking to you again, the age-old system, not new, Purana. And now you take the parampara system. You try to understand Krishna as Arjuna understood. That is bhakti. Otherwise, it is futile. There is no meaning. But if anyone has accepted the parampara system as Arjuna has understood, then he can speak on Bhagavad Gita. Otherwise, he has no right to speak anything. That is parampara. One of the participants suggested having an all India conference for the masses. All India conference, Prabhupada said. But this is not for mass understanding. Krishna said, Yadyaraja Rati Shrestha. Shrestha means the leaders of society, Rajarshayo, not ordinary persons, Raja. He must be just like Maharaj Yudhisthira, Maharaj Parikshit, Lord Ramachandra, Maharaj Ambarish. They are Rajarshi. They are saintly persons, but they are governors. Such persons should understand. Yadaracharati Shrestha Tattadevi Tarojana. It is not for the mass of people, because Manushyanam Sahasreshu Kastya Jatati Siddhaye. You cannot make a mass meeting and pass resolution and you'll understand Krishna. It's not like that. And the workers must also be Shrestha, not ordinary workers. They must understand Krishna. Then they can preach. So if you want to preach Bhagavad Gita, find out the Shrestha of the country. Sit down. Not that at mass conference, big meeting, you pass resolution and everything is done. Select. Just like we are all selected here and we are talking. If you understand, then you can preach. But if you do not understand what is Bhagavad Gita, how to understand Bhagavad Gita? What is Krishna? To understand Bhagavad Gita, one has to become a devotee, pure devotee. Not that because he's a learned scholar, he's a big politician, or a big yogi, or a big jnani, because Krishna plainly says, Bhaktyamam abhijanati yavanyas chasmi tatvataha. If you do not understand Krishna tatvataha, in truth, what he is, then it is natural one would interpret in his own way, his own philosophy. That's not the teaching of Bhagavad Gita. If you take Gyan, Yoga, Karma, and other, it is not problem. You have to receive it through the parampara system. It is not possible. You have to receive it through the parampara system. The parampara system is clear. As Arjuna understood, you have to take it. Then if you preach, it will be effective. Then what is your idea? Someone asked. If you ask my idea, then I become one of you. So I don't want that. I say, I'm a foolish man. I have no idea. Whatever Krishna says, that's the idea. Just like a child speaks the words of the Father. The child asks, Father, what is this? The Father says, this is a stick. So if the child says, this is a stick, that is correct. If you accept Krishna as the supreme, then where's the question of interpretation? Don't manufacture. What Krishna has said, you say. Just like a child can say, this is a stick. How have you learned? Father said, that's all. Toward the end of the discussion, Prabhupada spoke in Hindi about his successes and challenges in spreading Krishna consciousness in the Western world, and the participants were charmed. And at various points in the conversation, his words drew hearty laughter from his appreciative audience. At the end, Harisori said he had everyone smiling and laughing. But by the conclusion of the conference, the hosts were so impressed that they became life members and arranged for friends to take us around to meet other people to become life members. Sriman Narayana's wife, Madalsa, wrote a favorable article which was printed in major local newspapers. Before catching our flight to Bombay, Prabhupada spoke with Jagadish and me. How did you like my preaching? He asked. How did you like the way I spoke to them? I think we have injected our poison, he said, by which he meant nectar or medicine, and now it will act. Then he took out the seventh canto of Srimad Bhagavatam and read 2 verses spoken by Prahlad to his father about the blind leading the blind, along with the purports. Quote, because of their uncontrolled senses, persons too addicted to materialistic life make progress towards hellish conditions and repeatedly chew that which has already been chewed. Their inclinations toward Krishna are never aroused either by the instructions of others, by their own efforts, or by a combination of both. Famous verse. Purport. In this verse, the words Matir na Krishna refer to devotional service rendered to Krishna. So-called politicians, erudite scholars, and philosophers who read Bhagavad Gita try to twist some meaning from it to suit their material purposes, but their misunderstandings of Krishna will not yield them any profit. Because such politicians, philosophers, and scholars are interested in using Bhagavad Gita as a vehicle for adjusting things materially, for them, constant thought of Krishna or Krishna consciousness is impossible. Makir na Krishna, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 1855. Bhaktyamam abhijanati. Only through devotional service can one understand Krishna as he is. Bhogaishvarya prasaktanam. Those who are attached to material enjoyment cannot be fixed in devotional service to the Lord. They cannot understand Bhagavan Krishna or his instruction, Bhagavad Gita. As confirmed by Rishabdev, Mahatsevam Dwaramahor Vimukte, one must try to understand Krishna by serving a devotee. The word Mahat refers to a devotee, Mahatmanas Tamam Partha, etc. Unless one is properly trained by a Mahatma, or unalloyed devotee of the Lord, there is no possibility of one's understanding Krishna and his devotional service. 7:5:30. And, quote, persons who are strongly entrapped by the consciousness of enjoying material life and who have therefore accepted as their leader or guru, a similar blind man attached to external sense objects, cannot understand that the goal of life is to return home back to Godhead and engage in the service of Lord Vishnu. As blind men, guided by another blind man, miss the right path and fall into a ditch, materially attached men, led by another materially attached man, are bound by the ropes of fruitive labor, which are made of very strong cords, and they continue again and again in materialistic life, suffering, the threefold miseries. As stated in the purport, quote, gurus, teachers who are simply interested in this material world are described in this verse as andha, blind. Such blind men may lead many other blind followers without true knowledge of material conditions, but they are not accepted by devotees like Prahlad Maharaj. Such blind teachers, being interested in the external material world, are always bound by the strong ropes of material nature. Last paragraph here. We saw how applicable the reading was to what we had just witnessed. So-called scholars and politicians unable to do any good for anyone because they themselves were blind. And then the following verse was also applicable, that unless you smear your body with the dust at the feet of the devotee, you can't be engaged in devotional service, not by your speculation, by the instructions of others, or by joint efforts in big conferences. Okay. Some of the conference participants were on the flight with us from Nagpur to Bombay. I was sitting behind Prabhupada and across the aisle from Ramakrishna Bajaj. Innocently but foolishly, I told Mr. Bajaj what Prabhupada had said about injecting our poison. Oh, Giri Raj, why'd you do that? Hearing me, Prabhupada turned and glared at me as if to say, you weren't supposed to tell that to him. Although he could be quite forceful when he preached, and was sometimes blunt in private, Prabhupada was otherwise most tactful and polite. He argued on philosophical principles in debate, but he was always cordial in personal dealings. And because Prabhupada was so genuine, Mr. Bajaj remained friendly even after Prabhupada had taken such a strong position. And later he gave quite a large donation to one of our farm projects. And out of respect for Prabhupada, he held the next Gita conference at the Krishna Balaram temple in Vrindavan during Prabhupada's last days. Despite their philosophical differences, Swami Chidananda also felt blessed by Prabhupada's affection and Krishna consciousness. Some years later, he met with Radhanath Swami and spoke with him about Prabhupada. Quote, as we sat close, Radhanath Swami later remembered, he told me of his deep appreciation and respect for Srila Prabhupada and the wonderful things he had done to spread bhakti throughout the world. Then, with great enthusiasm, he asked me to tell him Prabhupada's life story. So I told him about Prabhupada's first meeting with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, how Prabhupada's friend Narendranath Malik insisted that he visit this great sadhu and took him to the Gaudiya Math in Calcutta. And they went upstairs to the rooftop where Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was speaking to a group of people. And almost immediately, Bhaktisiddhanta gave him a lifelong instruction. You are an intelligent young man. You should take the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu throughout the entire world in the English language. Before I could speak another word, Chidananda Saraswati, hearing, you should take the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the whole world in the English language, became so emotional that he jumped out of his seat, stood up, and raised one of his arms in the air, and tears flooding his eyes, said, that was not just an instruction, that was divine prophecy. He said it again. That was not just an instruction, that was divine prophecy. He did it. He actually did it. He spread Lord Chaitanya's teaching in the English language all over the world. He did it. Then he sat down, and I spoke about Prabhupada for another 45 minutes, and he was in rapt attention, emotionally listening and appreciating. Shortly after we returned to Bombay, I received a copy of Madalsa Narayan's article and showed it to Prabhupada. The article, which appeared in the major papers, praised Prabhupada and ISKCON for their work in re-spiritualizing society. It was especially significant because of all the accusations being leveled against us. Where she has sent this article, Prabhupada asked. In some of the newspapers in Wardha and maybe Nagpur. She has written very nicely, Prabhupada said, good writer. She picked up the essence of the movement, and he asked Gopal Krishna to publish the article in the next edition of Bhagavad Darshan, the Hindi counterpart of Back to Godhead. The next day, December 31, a local reporter came to interview Prabhupada. Quote, when you impart this knowledge to Western disciples, he asked, and when you talk to someone who is in India, what difference do you find? Indian men refuse this culture, Prabhupada replied. India's leaders, beginning from Gandhi and all, do not know what is India's culture. They have forgotten. Would you like to include Gandhi also in that? Oh, yes. Otherwise, how can it be? Andha yatandhayar upaniyamana, the blind leading the blind. But he was the one who also preached Gita but he did not know Gita, actually. Recently, I have been in his ashram. They are maintaining the chattai and the lantern in memory. What is that? If Mahatma Gandhi understood Gita, he should have introduced it in that ashram. Where is that? The chattai food arrangement is there. That is done by his disciples and not by him. That means he could not make his disciples correctly. That is true. That is true. Therefore, he did not know. Now, see how, within 10 years, my disciples are working all over the world. I am sitting here, but still, my business is going on. You have to train in such a way. The deity worship is going on. They are now opening different branches, establishing deity exactly in the way I've trained. It is a question of training. Here he goes. Gandhi manufactured. The Bhagavad Gita was spoken in the battlefield, and he wanted to draw the conclusion of nonviolence. What is this? Krishna says, Kutastva kashmalamidam vishame. In this battlefield, you're talking nonsense, that I'll not fight. He says so, and Gandhi wanted to make it nonviolent. Just see how from the very beginning he distorted, and people accept it. Yadiracharati Shrestha. He was a Shrestha, a leader. So whatever he will say, people will accept. The whole India became spoiled. Ooh, to a reporter, not just for weeks after Prabhupada's visit to Wardha and Paunar, he expressed his chagrin that despite the conference participants and local people's claims to accept the Bhagavad Gita, no one was actually worshiping Krishna, not even at Mahatma Gandhi's and Vibha Bhave's ashrams, because their leaders didn't accept the Bhagavad Gita as it was presented by Krishna. He quoted the Bhagavad Gita 9:12. Moga shimoga karma no moga jnana vachitasa. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruit of activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. Because Gandhi had not recognized Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prabhupada explained to an Indian guest on one morning walk, his hopes and endeavors had been baffled. Quote, his ambition was Hindu-Muslim unity, and that was banned. His ambition was nonviolence, and he was killed by violence. A person so dedicated, so nice, but he followed the wrong path. Recently, I had been to his Sevagram in Wardha. There was no Krishna. And he said he was very fond of Bhagavad Gita, but he understood Bhagavad Gita in his own way. And in Bhagavad Gita, it is said that as soon as you try to understand Bhagavad Gita in your own way, it is finished. Nashta. Yoga nashta parantapa. So nashta. What is nashta? What is the use of? So, suppose I supply you something which is spoiled. What benefit you will derive? Therefore, no benefit is derived by the people in general, either from Gandhi or Vinod Bhave or Tilak, because it was nashta. Just like if you're hungry, if you get some real food, you'll understand. The example is these American and European boys. They're simply chanting Hare Krishna and you see how they're advanced. But you won't take. That's your fault. You have manufactured your own way of life. Otherwise, Hare Krishna is India's gift, but you won't take it. What is the weakness of the Indian society? A visiting gentleman asked. They've got bad leaders, Prabhupada replied. Rascal leaders, just like Mahatma Gandhi. He misled. He did not know how to lead. What to speak of others? They do not know. I saw this Vinoba Bhave. He does not know anything, and he has become a leader. I saw in his ashram about 12 women. They were reciting Bhagavad Gita. That's all. For the last 40 years, he's working on Bhagavad Gita. And the result is some 40 women reciting Bhagavad Gita. That is the result. So what they will do, they do not know how to lead. And he has written one book on Bhagavad Gita. And that is also not according to Bhagavad Gita. But he has become a great leader. This is going on. Prabhupada mentioned that I had told him that Vinoba Bhave had declared that he was going to fully retire and endeavor for moksha. That means till now he was not on the liberated platform, he pointed out. Vinoba Bhave is really a Brahmin, another man said. Yes, I know that, Prabhupada responded. That may be Brahmin in Sattva-guna. That may be. But that doesn't mean liberation. But there is knowledge. At least he understands what is liberation and what is not. So if he's trying for becoming liberated, it is understood that he was not liberated. Now our point is that if you're not liberated, how can you become leader? That is cheating. In a conversation, whack. In a conversation a month later, in Bhubaneswar, Prabhupada said, recently I went to Wardha, Mahatma Gandhi's ashram. Nobody is there. And they are worshiping Mahatma's lantern and Mahatma's chadar. Not a single picture of Krishna. He chuckled. There is not a single picture of Krishna. And in Bhagavad Gita it is said, Bhajante Mam Ananya Bhak. This is going on. And again, in Juhu, in April, he said, recently I had been to Vinoba Bhave's ashram, and there is no Krishna. And he is writing Bhagavad Gita Pravachan, or something like that. Even in Gandhi's ashram, Wardha, Gandhi's lantern is being worshipped. And where is Krishna? The Bhagavad Gita's instruction is, Mam Ekam Sharanam Braja, surrender to Krishna, and they're worshipping Gandhi's lantern. It is a very nice place. How could it be developed as a Krishna conscious center? But they have given up this idea. Prabhupada is taking on the world. Prabhupada's disciple Amoga Leela Das, who was assisting me in Juhu, did not have much personal association with Prabhupada, but one morning he joined him for his morning walk. Because Prabhupada wasn't feeling well, instead of going to Juhu Beach, he walked on the rooftop above his quarters at the back of Hare Krishna land. And Amoga took the opportunity to join him. Quote, I heard that you quoted a saying that anyone who goes to Lanka becomes a Ravana. And that similarly, when devotees come to India, they become Ravana. Moggolila had said to him, can you explain what you meant and how we can avoid that happening? Ask the leaders, Prabhupada replied. I was saying that in all our other branches, our devotees manage the cooking and kitchen. There was no question of hiring or paying someone to do work in the temple. The devotees would do everything, cut the vegetables, cook the prasad, wash the pots, clean the kitchen, do the laundry, clean the bathrooms. But as soon as they come here, they become Bada Sahibs, big masters. That is Ravana. Why do they not do here? Here we have to keep some cook who is neither initiated nor very clean. In all other branches, the boys and girls manage everything. So the solution Amoghaliya proposed is to follow your instructions, to chant the holy names and follow the regulations more strictly. That means Ravana, Prabhupada retorted. He is asking. I am repeatedly saying to follow, and he's asking. That means he's a Ravana. Why you're inquiring? If you don't know this is the solution, why don't you do it? If you know this is the solution, why don't you do it? Therefore I say, Ye ya Lankaya, say Haya Ravana. Anyone who comes to Lanka, he becomes Ravana. So Amoghaliya started going around saying, Srila Prabhupada wants us to do all the cooking ourselves. We should get rid of the hired people. The next morning, our local GBC told Amoghaliya that he had informed Prabhupada how Amoghaliya was telling devotees that we should get rid of our hired help, and that Srila Prabhupada had said, who is this Amoghaliya? Why is he creating disturbance? Prabhupada wanted us to know, be convinced, that if we just followed his instructions, the process that he had given, all the problems would be solved. And we should apply such instructions intelligently according to time, place, and circumstances, as Prabhupada did. Shoo. So that was chapter 2. There's a nice map at the Dadar Worli. Okay. Juhu. Preaching in Prayag and Bombay, January to September 1977. Now we're on page 424. Allahabad Mahakumbh Mela. In Allahabad, Prayag, at the confluence of the Ganges, Yamuna, and Saraswati rivers, more than 1 million sadhus and pilgrims gather every year to bathe at auspicious times, which is said to guarantee relief from the cycle of birth and death. The annual event is called Magha Mela. Mela means fair or gathering, and Magha is the month, spanning parts of January and February in the lunar calendar. Prabhupada told us that the site of the festival was considered very sacred because Mohini Murti had brought nectar there. Kumbha, he said, means the water pot. The water pot. Every 12th year, the cosmic arrangement is even more auspicious, and that Mela was known as Kumbh Mela. Every 12th year, Mela is Maha Kumbh Mela, when the star formations and astronomical influences are even more auspicious. After visiting the Kumbh Mela in 1895, Mark Twain wrote, "It is wonderful, the power of a faith like that you can make multitudes upon multitudes of the old and weak and the young and frail enter without hesitation or complaint upon such incredible journeys and endure the resultant miseries without repining. It is done in love or it is done in fear. I do not know which it is. No matter what the impulse is, the act born of it is beyond imagination, marvelous to our kind of people." Mark Twain. Did you know Mark Twain attended?
No.
Huh. The Mela of 1977 was going to be Maha Kumbh Mela, the first in 144 years. 15 million people were to attend, and Prabhupada wanted to participate. On his morning walk on Juhu Beach on January 8th, Prabhupada explained the real benefit of holy convocation. Kumbh Mela is satsanga. If you go to Kumbh Mela to find out a man of knowledge, then your Kumbh Mela is right. Otherwise, yat tirtha buddhi salile saeva gokara. If one thinks that this shalila, the water, to take bath in the water is Kumbh Mela, he is a gokara, a cow or an ass. The real idea is that now there is an assembly of so many saintly persons, let me take advantage of their knowledge. Then he is intelligent. It is a congress of highly learned saintly persons. People should take advantage. We tried to book Prabhupada's train to Allahabad for the morning of January 11, but millions of people were going to the Mela, and we couldn't get seats. It so happened, however, that one of our recent friends and life members, Rabindranath Gupta, was a chief engineer in the railway system, and he arranged to get 2 cars added onto a train. Fantastic. A first class and a second class carriage to accommodate Prabhupada and the devotees, and had Prabhupada's car freshly painted and decorated with garlands. Hoo-wee. The day before we left, Rameswar arrived in Bombay, and he, Jagadish, and Harisori rode to Allahabad in the same cabin with Prabhupada, and I often joined them. The, quote, brainwashing case was going on in New York, and Prabhupada, eager to preach and fortify us, asked, "What are they saying?" Ramaswara laid out the opposition's arguments, and Prabhupada refuted them. "What else do they say?" he asked, and Ramaswara gave other arguments, which again Prabhupada defeated. The discussion ranged over various topics, and we were all enlivened by Prabhupada's preaching. When we arrived in Allahabad the next morning, several sannyasi disciples and 50 or so other devotees were there to greet Prabhupada. Abhiram and Guru Das had brought Prabhupada's car from Delhi and drove him from the station to our site on the far side of the Mela. The campsite was out of the way on an island called Gangadweep, a 20-minute walk from the Triveni bathing area, and unlike most of the other sites, it was too far from the city lines to get electricity. It had no front gate and was outfitted with only basic facilities: outdoor toilets, running water, and a partitioned area with some bricks and a hole in the ground for cooking. Prabhupada was upset about the camp's remote location and the lack of electricity, both of which would limit the number of visitors. There would be no lights for evening programs, no electric heaters in the cold, damp, and windy winter conditions, no facility for his translation work. He called for Bhagavat and Guru Das, who had been the main organizers. Who got this land? He demanded. When I got here, it was an empty field, Bhagavat said. They told me, we are putting you on this island. The governor is there. Kalapatri Maharaj is there. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi is there. I thought you were all the leading person with all the leading personalities. You are inexperienced, so they cheated you, Prabhupada told them. All right, you did not know. When he heard that they also had not purchased enough food for mass distribution, however, he again became upset and called for Bhagavat. Why is there no prasad distribution tonight? He questioned. I don't know. Bhagavat replied, they didn't buy any food. Why have they not bought? Prabhupada asked. What is the matter with you? You Americans are big spenders, simply wasting money. You have no stock of food? Why did you not stock rice, dal, and wheat? What is the matter with you? You have no brain. You spent 5 rupees cab fare going, 5 rupees cab fare coming back, and you buy 1 rupee of rice. This is your mentality. You are nonsense. Every time you need something, you go to the store and buy it. You don't know how to buy sufficiently at one time and then use it. You cannot think like that. And why have you made this location under the elevated train? Why you have done this wrong? The train is making noise. This pandal is a failure. Food is not being distributed. Bhagavat finally did get us connected to the electric lines, but as with other camps, the power frequently went off. Only a few people visited our pandal that evening, and Prabhupada sat in the dark at his desk all night, bundled up in sweaters, a heavy winter coat, a chadar, and gloves. Prabhupada would sit at his desk and seem not to be doing anything externally, Ramaswar later remembered. He would be leaning back, and it appeared that he was resting. It was freezing cold all night in that tent with raging winds. Someone got hold of a kerosene heater, but even with Ramaswar staying up and to relight it, the wind kept blowing it out, and it did little to warm the tent. Prabhupada was already quite weak, and by morning his hands and feet were swollen, and he had a bad cold, with watering eyes and a runny nose. He was constantly sniffling and did not go to the river for bathing, but instead used the icy water from the pump next to his tent. For me, every night it was the same routine, Ramaswar later recalled. No sleep, and then go outside to the camp, to the pump. It was freezing, bitter cold winter, and pump the ice-cold water and take your morning bath. And Prabhupada was taking the same kind of baths, but in a private area behind the tent. That was our Kumbh Mela. They had no electricity in the tents, no heat. We couldn't get anything together. It was painful for me, this is now Giriraj, and the other devotees, especially Prabhupada's personal staff, to see Prabhupada undergoing such austerities while suffering ill health. Hardly any of us had seen him in such a condition, and we were worried. Many thought he should leave. maybe to Bhubaneswar, which was warmer, and where the water of Bindu Sarovar was supposed to have special medicinal properties. Kaushalya, who was also concerned about Prabhupada's poor health, had brought him a saffron cashmere sweater. When she gave it to him, he felt it against his cheek and said, "Oh, very soft. Thank you very much, Kaushalya." And then he instructed her to go open a temple in Bangalore. Oh, Prabhupada. By the morning of the 15th, I started asking Prabhupada if we could leave. Ramaswar remembered. It wasn't because I was uncomfortable. I was having an ecstatic time, staying up all night, not feeling tired the next day, going out on the kirtans, serving Prabhupada, feeling Prabhupada's mercy. I was very excited, but Prabhupada was getting sick, and I was really getting worried. I've never seen him so sick. Plus, there was no electricity, so he wasn't able to translate. The preaching was picking up, however, and word had begun to circulate that Prabhupada, the guru of the Hare Krishna movement, was there. People were coming to see him, thousands of them, and is receiving invitation from important personalities. He said that those coming to the Mela were expecting all the holy men and spiritual teachers of India to be present, so he felt obligated to stay until the 21st, when he was booked by train to Calcutta. The devotees were suggesting that he leave, but he resisted. He wanted to stay and preach. "We must take advantage of the situation for Sankirtan," he said. Kumbh Mela was an opportunity for the devotees to preach, not merely bathe in the Ganges, in the Ganga. "My only ambition is that so many people can become enlightened. Our men must go for chanting and book distribution." Devotees had come from all over India and from all around the world for the upcoming Mayapur festival. Guru Kripa and his Namahata men were the most organized group. He arranged that every morning the devotees would have rich prasad, French fries and halava, and lots of ghee. It would give them energy and enthusiasm to go out all day, he said. And his plan seemed to work. On the third day, the first major bathing day since we'd arrived, 50 of us wound our way through the Mela grounds chanting and distributing books. Mainly pious people had come for the Mela, so we were able to distribute thousands of books, 8,000 on just the first day. And the Kirtan party captivated people's hearts. Many had come from villages or remote places and had no idea that foreigners could become devotees of Krishna. They would bow down when they saw us coming in procession, looking like Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan party. Lie down flat on the ground, roll in the dust, pick up the dust, and put it in their mouths. And they were eager to render service and buy our books. Most of them were poor, so we had one devotee carry a water pot in front of each party, and people would throw paisas in the pot or into the sannyasis' top cloths, which the sannyasis held out like aprons. If someone gave a rupee, we would give him a book. Many were illiterate, but as Prabhupada had said on the train to Allahabad, at least they won't have to hear the false propaganda of the scientists. Prabhupada. When we returned to our camp, Prabhupada expressed his pleasure over the day's success and ordered some of the sannyasis and other leaders to stay at the Mela until all the books were distributed. And by his grace, the whole effort became a tremendous success. People all over the Mela We're talking about the Hare Krishna devotees. The books themselves became so popular and famous that people would approach us and ask, "Do you have Sugam Yatra? Easy journey. Give me Janma Mrityu, say Pari, beyond birth and death," etc. They're asking for the books by name. I'd like to be near the Harinam party and the other devotees while distributing, but sometimes I was so besieged by pilgrims asking for books that I couldn't move. It was like I were in a sea of people, and every so often I would raise my head above the water, above the pilgrims' heads, to see the other devotees also engulfed. It was encouraging and enlivening, and in all, we distributed 30,000 books. I would interact with the pilgrims in simple Hindi phrases and sentences and got so much in the mood that when I returned to Bombay and distributed books at the railway station, I would approach people in Hindi. Though almost invariably they would reply in English. Prabhupada said that he too wanted to bathe in the Triveni, the confluence of the three rivers, but he did not want to go into the crowd. So, at his request, two devotees went at the most auspicious hour, managed to reach the river's confluence, and returned with a bucket of water so that he could bathe with it the following morning. When Prabhupada gave darshan the next morning, everyone wanted to know how his bath had been. He thought for a moment and said, "It was like any bath, in any water from the tap." Even though many millions of people went to the Triveni during Kumbh Mela to take their auspicious bath, he explained, any service that anyone did anywhere in the world for the pleasure of Krishna was more auspicious. Outside Prabhupada's tent was an area of sand covered with straw, enclosed by colorful shamiana cloth partitions. And when people learned that he was in the ISKCON camp, they started to gather for darshan, especially in the evening. Although Prabhupada felt weak, he allowed us to set up a chair and a microphone for him. And even in the cold, the entire area was packed with people, with more people tilting down the cloth walls and looking over them. Even movie, radio, and television people were there, along with the usual newspaper reporters. Everyone wanted to hear Prabhupada. All the reporters had the same question. What is the significance of Kumbh Mela? Prabhupada answered that the heart of the Mela was Sadhu Sangha, that it was meant to bring the common man in touch with saintly persons. He explained that there were three types of transcendentalists who were after either Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan, and that Kumbh Mela was the one time when all types of transcendentalists came together to give ordinary people a chance to get their association. Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Siddhi Hoy. By even a moment's association with the sadhu, one can attain all success. As Tamal Krishna later wrote, quote, though in India there were many sadhus, gurus, and holy men, no one could come close to equaling Srila Prabhupada. By accompanying him in his travels, the devotees repeatedly observed the uniqueness of their spiritual master in comparison with all others. When they met in Allahabad to observe the Kumbh Mela festival, where all the saintly persons in India assemble once every 12 years, Prabhupada appeared as a brilliant full moon compared with all the other luminous personalities present. The appreciation his devotees felt for him was not exaggerated due to partiality. Whomever he contacted could not fail to be moved by his utter conviction and devotion to serving Krishna. Through lecturing, kirtan, prasad distribution, and the distribution of his books, through the Life Membership Program, Prabhupada was able to gain a widespread acceptance for ISKCON throughout India within a remarkably short time. In the end, Prabhupada's illness posed too great a risk, and Ramaswamy was able to convince him to leave. There is something much more important than your giving darshan to these people, he said, and that is your writing of your books. Only a few thousand people are going to see you here, but if you go on writing, we will distribute your books by the millions. Millions of people will have your darshan. There is no facility for writing here. The climate is too cold and your health is weak. Let's go to Bhubaneswar where it's warm and they have healthy water. Prabhupada liked the argument that his writing was more important than giving darshan to the Kumbh Mela pilgrims. He liked that we had appreciation of his books, Ramaswamy recalled, and he liked that we had that spirit of distributing millions of them, so he agreed to go. But getting the tickets was not easy. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was expected to arrive soon, so the army was everywhere, and the Mela grounds were packed. Ramaswamy Guru Das put a press sticker on the front window and kept honking the horn as they inched through the crowd, but they still couldn't make much progress. Finally, an army officer sat on the car's hood and pushed people aside. When Ramaswamy Guru Das got to the train station, however, they found that every train was fully booked. No seats would be available for weeks. But just when they were about to give up, they happened to run into Mr. Gupta, the same friend who arranged our passage from Bombay. When they told Mr. Gupta of the situation, he immediately phoned Bombay and had a first-class coach added to a train coming from Bombay to Allahabad and then connected to a train going from Allahabad to Calcutta. All right. On Prabhupada's last day at the Mela, I went to see him with some questions. He had been traveling throughout the year, and I hadn't had much of his personal association. Several questions had built up in my mind, but I had felt a little shy about approaching him. As Prabhupada packed, getting ready to leave, he gave last-minute instructions to devotees. Lokanath asked about Gopal Krishna's idea for him to leave his bullock cart program and become a bhakti director in Bombay, and Prabhupada advised him to continue his program and pointed out that there was no need of a separate program for new devotees because our general temple program was meant for new devotees. Anyone could join, attend the temple program, and make spiritual advancement. And if someone wasn't able to maintain himself in a regular temple program, he could join Lokanath and travel on the bull cart. Encouraged by Ramaswamy to present my thoughts and questions to Prabhupada, I approached him. Gopal Krishna kept insisting that I collect money, I said, but I felt I should preach to the colleges, and make devotees. What should I do? Prabhupada replied that conversion was our first business. Next, I asked about Bombay. Mogulila had been managing there, and I thought he should continue so that I could be relieved. But he wanted to do something else. Again, Prabhupada encouraged me. No, he said, you must be free to preach. I will speak to Mogulila and convince him to continue managing. I told Prabhupada that Saurabh didn't appreciate my involvement in the construction and that it might be better if I withdrew from that area altogether. No, Prabhupada replied, your presence is required. His answers were both supportive and reassuring, and I felt closer to him than I had in years. And that's the end for this evening's reading. Quite an adventure indeed. One thing after the next. But it's 1977, Prabhupada's health is bad, and so it's not going to get better.